But even if I put Blaine Gabbert in as a quarterback, I took out Eisman Vita Vea is probably going to sit because he missed 2 games before coming back in this most recent game. It would make sense to rest him, given he has been banged up and he's a super important player for that team. So if I take out those guys, I still think the Bucs should not be 3-point underdogs in this game.
Welcome to another episode of the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host, and on this episode, I'm thrilled to have Jim Sannes of FanDuel on the show. Among other topics, we talk about how his NFL model works and how it has evolved this season and how he uses it to bet. He also talks about his trick for finding player props that he likes. And finally, we talk about a number of NFL games. This includes Detroit at Green Bay, Tennessee at Jacksonville, and Tampa Bay at Atlanta. The Football Analytics Show is brought to you by the Power Ranks Sports Betting Newsletter. This is a free service that strives to be 3 things. 1, valuable. 2, concise. 3, entertaining. In this newsletter, I write about college football and NFL bets that I've made. I've also sent out a curated list of tips and news every Saturday morning. If you sign up right now, you get a chance to listen to the audio episode I produced about the secret to predicting the college football and NFL playoffs. This was an episode that I first made for patrons of this podcast, but if you sign up for my free email newsletter, you can listen to it as well. I think it's an excellent episode, although I'm obviously biased. To sign up for this free service, go to thepowerrank.com. That is my site for better sports betting tips through data and analytics. Once again, that's thepowerrank.com. Joining me on this episode of the Football Analytics Show is Jim Sannes. He's a senior writer and analyst at FanDuel, and he is the host of Covering the Spread. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ed. Happy New Year to you. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. It's actually kind of a weird morning just with what happened in the NFL last night. I was actually a little late getting to the game with the Bills at the Bengals. And when I got there, there was an ambulance on the field. And obviously everyone knows what happened. Damar Hamlin, the safety for the Bills. Actually, maybe we should just summarize real quick. I mean, made a hit that, he got hit in the chest. It was a hard hit, but not anything that you don't see on a football Sunday in the NFL. He stands up and then immediately falls over. He is still in critical condition. So obviously I want to offer my best to the Bills and Hamlin himself. I'm sure everyone agrees with that. But how are you doing this morning given all the craziness from last night?
It's just uneasy, I guess. Just refreshing Twitter for updates at all times. You're kind of hoping for good updates. This is similar to if you remember the Daytona 500 a couple years ago where Ryan Newman got hurt, and you're just refreshing Twitter looking for updates, and any little morsel is okay, I guess, maybe that's a positive. But it's always hard to tell. So it's just kind of uneasy, I guess, because you're just waiting and there's nothing you can do while you wait. You just kind of sit there and hope that good news comes in, but you have no control over that. So I don't know. I mean, it's a weird spot to be in. I feel awful for his teammates, for him, for his family, and for everyone who had to be there, even to T. Higgins and the Bengals. That's tough for them too. So it's just odd and it's eerie and it's weird to just sit here and refresh Twitter hoping for news and just kind of waiting on that because there's not a lot you can do until then.
It's an interesting lesson in how to deal with Twitter too, because when I saw the tweet that he had a pulse but was in the hospital in critical condition, and then I do my due diligence and click on the tweeter's profile, which had basically no information. Mm-hmm. Whether it was a legit source or not. It turns out that it was Hamlin's agent.
Right.
And it was good information. But yeah, I think
this game and the postponement of this game has some really interesting consequences for the NFL season. We are recording this Tuesday morning. There has been no announcement about when they're going to play this game. The Buffalo Bills went home last night. It only kind of makes sense to play this game today or tomorrow. I think today's kind of out of the question. Wednesday, you could make an argument that they could play that game in Cincinnati, and then they would still have 3 days until Sunday to play their Week 18 games, which matter a lot. Buffalo and Cincinnati are in playoff contention. You could actually imagine playing those games on Monday, which would, I don't know how that works with the college football championship game. And so, yeah, there's a lot of implications here. And I don't know if you have any guess at what's going to happen and how they're going to play this. They have to play it, right?
I don't even know. I guess like my working assumption has been that they wouldn't. But that could be totally wrong because, like you said, there are a lot of implications in this, and I think the NFL is. I mean, like as tough as it is for us, where our job revolves around knowing, especially for Week 18, knowing motivation, knowing all that stuff, and that all hinges on what happens in this game. It's like it puts us in a tough spot. I empathize with the NFL. I think they're handling it right in not announcing things before we get an update on how he's doing, because I mean, there are a lot of ways this can play out. So I think that having patience, as frustrating as it may be for us, I think that's the right way to do things because, like, I don't know, like, there's always a worst case scenario. What if something, doesn't get better? That's really frightening to think about. And you can't ask the Bills to play on Wednesday if there's still a lot of uncertainty. I guess that's just kind of where I come down on it. And I think about it, if I'm a Bills player, how do you play that game with uncertainty still there? So if his condition improves, then yeah, I think Wednesday makes a lot of sense. But I think with so much uncertainty, I guess maybe I'm just totally misreading this or what, but like, I just feel like it's hard to envision playing this game, maybe just kind of as a tie. I don't know. It's so tough because like, then the Ravens would have a legitimate gripe, because like they're trying to win the division. I don't think they can win the division if this game winds up being a tie. So teams that are not involved in this at all could be negatively impacted by calling it a tie. So I feel bad for the NFL. Like the NFL has had, it stumbled upon some certain things. It's definitely had its missteps for sure, but I don't envy them being in this position because I think I would say I don't think there is a right answer. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I'm glad I brought you on for the compassionate, empathetic view, which contrasts my cold-hearted capitalist view that they have to play this game simply because the NFL is a billion-dollar corporation and obviously all the consequences that you mentioned. So, yeah, I don't think there's a right answer.
Right.
Hearing you talk about it makes me think that it'll either be a tie or they will go into the postseason with 16 games for the Bills and the Bengals, and they'll figure out some tiebreakers that doesn't make everyone upset about it.
Right. It's just like it's kind of like obviously this is like a secondary thing, but it is kind of a no-win situation in the NFL. There is no right answer. And I think that's tough. But I think that even though it took them a long time to like postpone the game last night, they did wind up doing the right thing. So yeah, I think they've handled it well so far. And I don't, the NFL's botched a lot of things. It's hard to say. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. But I think that like whatever they decide to do here, I feel like that's going to be the best answer just because they have better updates in the situation than we do. They understand the implications, ripple effects better than we do. So I don't typically want to give the NFL the benefit of the doubt for a lot of reasons. Like history is a good reason not to, but I think in this situation, I kind of do want to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Absolutely. And we will do that. And we will move on to questions of betting and analytics, which is why I wanted to have you on the show, Jim. So could you give us a little bit more details about like you have an NFL model? Mm-hmm. I believe the last time that we were on the show, this model didn't exist.
Yeah.
So maybe describe from a top, a very general level. We don't want you to give away all your secrets, but from a general level, what goes into your NFL model and how it impacts your handicapping process.
Yeah, so it's nothing too like intricate. It leans on NumberFire's schedule adjusted efficiency metric. So NumberFire has this metric called net expected points, which is basically just their version of EPA. So it's leaning on EPA to predict which teams will play well going forward, and it adjusts their schedule and stuff like that. And so we talked last time, like you said, I didn't have this model yet. I have since built a different model because I wanted to lean on the research you, Bill Connolly, and everyone have done, showing that success rate is important. My goal was to make a model that had early down efficiency, late down success rate, to kind of combine those two, because late downs can be very spiky, and you want to smooth out those spikes to make things more predictable going forward. So I built out a separate model, and what I'm doing right now is running that model in tandem with the old model, the one that leans just on EPA and doesn't look at success rate as much. So I'm running them in tandem, kind of having a little competition down the stretch here. And surprisingly to me, the one that leans on EPA is outperforming the one that I built more recently, which is disappointing to put a lot of work into a model and then have it not wind up being better than what you had previously. But I feel pretty okay about that. I kind of want to just, let them both run and see which one performs better. So the one that weights up passing efficiency a lot, leans heavily on that, weighs down defense because defense can be more volatile, more dependent on fluky plays like turnovers, fumble luck, and stuff like that. It's actually doing pretty well. So I've been running from week 13 on, because week 13 was a point where I didn't have a prior for the new model. So I wanted to wait until the prior was mostly phased out for the old model and kind of run them, make injury adjustments and stuff like that. And I have like the mean squared error for the new model, the old model in the market. And the old model, the mean squared error from week 13 on is 144.14. The new model is 152.57, and the Tuesday markets is 150.74. So you want the mean squared error to be lower because it means you're closer to the actual result. And I think it's encouraging not just that the older model is outperforming the new model, but also it's outperforming the Tuesday market. And the close mean squared error, the game day market's at 148.65 in that time, whereas again 144.14 on Tuesday. So before final injury report adjustments, it's outperforming that number. I don't think that's sustainable because beating closing markets in the NFL over a large sample, probably not going to happen. But I think that to me does make me feel better about having a model that I thought was flawed. And I was trying to get away from it, trying to go to this new model that I think operates in a better fashion. But if it's going to perform better, then it's kind of hard for me to argue with that success and just cast it towards the wayside because I think it may be flawed.
Right. I think points are still an important way of evaluating teams, and that's kind of the basis of what's going in your net expected points in what you're calling the old model, right? So we certainly shouldn't throw that out. These error metrics go over the course of the season?
This is from week 13 on, so it's a small sample.
Okay.
So this is a small sample, but I do have the spread relative to the market. Like if I have 2 points of edge versus the market. So if a team is 5.5 point favorite, I've got them favored by 7.5, putting that down. The ROI on all those bets be 8.85% for the old model. And if it's from week 13 on, the new model ROI would be 34.79%. So it's been on a heater. That's why I don't think that it can do this again, like long term, having the low mean squared error. But the new model is at 16.46% in that time. So it's, it has a positive ROI. It's definitely good, but not as good as the older model. So I feel like both have been kind of unsustainably good recently. So I don't want to overreact to the small sample. Want to run at week 18. That's also why I'm probably going to run both again next year, because it is weeks 13 through 18 and the playoffs. So that's a small sample. Sure. I want to expand that. So I'm going to run both next year too. But I think that when I'm betting win totals next year, and early season, the primary anchor for my bets will be that older model because it has performed better so far.
Absolutely. I feel like a lot of the models kind of do well in tandem. My model's been pretty good over the last couple of weeks. I don't remember if that started week 13 or not, but it has been pretty good after a pretty disastrous start the first 3 weeks of the season, which was surprising, honestly, because that's usually a pretty good time for the model. I pretty strongly believe in the preseason priors that I work on. But that's great to hear that your model has been doing well.
Yeah, so for me, same thing. Weeks 1 through 3, negative ROI. Through week 4, also negative ROI. Week 5,
this is the old model, right?
Yeah, the old model, because I don't have the older data for the new model, because it was pretty. It was built in the off season, but I didn't start running it in season until later on. It was around week 9 where it turned around. So I'm guessing it's probably like you said. If it's a numbers based model, probably going to all perform better at the same time. So around week 9 is where mine kind of finally started to kick in, which is, I agree with you, where I was kind of surprised by that, because I do like the win total numbers I ran this year are doing well. So it's weird that the dates, the games that rely heavily on that prior didn't test well also.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm guessing the old model is higher on Philadelphia than the new model.
Let me check here. Are we talking about for the full season?
Probably for the full season. I mean, Philadelphia was one of those teams that kind of broke things early in the season. They were doing so well compared to preseason expectations. The more I look at it more recently, Philadelphia seems to struggle more with the success rate type numbers. After my adjustments, they have been probably better than they have been better than expected on explosive plays.
Mm-hmm.
So Philly is kind of like my benchmark team for figuring out which model, which they should do well with points. They should do less well with your new model.
So it's interesting because their success rate on late down specifically is very good. If you adjust for opponent, their adjusted late down success rate is 51.55%. The league average is 43.91%. So they're actually doing really well. They were above Kansas City for 1 week. Kansas City's been leading that metric for the entire season. They were above them for a week. Dallas actually does now lead in that number. So it's Dallas 1, Kansas City 2, Philadelphia 3. So at least on late down, their success rate is very good. I'm guessing that their success rate in early downs is lower because they can be a little bit run heavy. Their early down pass rate is 50.95%. So they can be a bit run heavy there. That might be why their overall success rate is lower. But on late downs, when they need to, if they need 6 yards, they're typically getting 6 yards more often than not.
Yeah, absolutely. Based on these models that you've told us about, Jim, is there a Week 18 NFL bet that you'd be willing to share with us?
Yeah, and it's actually one that's in a bigger game. And it's one that I think, Ed, we always want to try to get good closing line value. This one, there's a decent shot it doesn't, because something could happen earlier in the day that could, ruin this market. But I think the Lions are undervalued to win their game against the Packers. Their money line is plus 188 at FanDuel. And the reason that could get negative CLV is if Seattle wins that early game in the afternoon, then the Lions are eliminated from the postseason, which means they cannot advance. And they'd have nothing on the line, whereas Green Bay would be in a win-and-in situation. So there is a very good chance that Sunday afternoon we get negative CLV on this bet, which is not fun. But I think that a lot of that possibility is being baked into this number. And where does it go if Seattle wins? If this makes it or if Seattle loses, making this a true winner-take-all game on Sunday night, I think that possibility is in play too. Seattle is rightly favored in their game against the Rams, so there's a very good chance they do wind up winning that game. They are 6.5 point favorites there. My numbers have that a little bit closer, I think, 5.34. So a little bit closer, but still decently favoring Seattle. So there's a decent chance that the Lions are limited, but you are in Michigan, Ed, so Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell's not laying down if he's limited from the postseason. I still feel like they're going to put forth a good effort. They're not preparing any backups for this game because they won't know until about an hour before kick if they're officially eliminated. So the Seahawks could lose that game. That's a possibility. And if they do win, I still think that the Lions are going to put forth a really good effort here. So it's a weird situation we don't often get in betting, where you're betting into a market where there is a very good chance you get negative CLV. But I think that the plus 188 money line Lions is very enticing. My old model, like I said, is super reliant on passing efficiency. The Lions passing offense has been unreal efficient this year, even in the road games. We talk about Jared Goff on the road, but even if you look at the Giants game, the Carolina game, his passing efficiency numbers are still phenomenal in those games. So it leans on passing efficiency. They've been very good there. They're up to 6th on offense in the new model. So I think that they're undervalued here. I think this game is a lot closer than the market leads you to think, and I think a lot of the downsides of it are already baked in under the assumption that Seahawks win and make this an irrelevant game for the Lions.
So both models have, what are you making the spread?
The old model is very high in Detroit. That one has it as the Detroit favored. I can't hide that. It has Detroit favored. The new model has Green Bay favored by 2.56, so less than a field goal for that one.
Okay, interesting. Jim, I feel like we're allowed to hide predictions when they're so off market. I certainly do. I didn't tell anyone. I'm pretty sure when I was uncovering the spread, I did not tell anyone what my model said about Georgia versus Ohio State. Yeah. Because my model said Georgia by a half point. Yeah. And obviously I'm being kind of ridiculous telling you now.
Right.
Given the game result of the game.
No, same thing for me. I had last week for the Detroit-Chicago game, it was a 5.5 point spread. I had that 11. And I thought that was outrageous. Like I'm not high on the Bears. That's outrageous. And it's the same thing. And they wound up, blowing them out. But like I 100% am on board you there.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and just with Ohio State, Georgia was a 6.5 point, 7 point favorite at some times, and I'm not the only one, Jim. Eddie Walls was on the RAS, the Right Angle Sports podcast, and he was talking about how he had these teams basically as a pick all season. Yeah. I was like, yep, me too. That's exactly. I went back through every week and it's like, I'm making this game a pick. And then he talked about, how much do you adjust after the Michigan disaster? Of course, he didn't give his answer about what his number was. But
I feel like, based on your logic, you wouldn't adjust much because the Michigan disaster was, I'm assuming you're talking about the Ohio State-Michigan game where a lot of the downsides for Ohio State were turnover luck in high leverage situations and big plays, both of which can be kind of fluky.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So I guess I'm just trying to say that I sometimes hide where the number is. When it's particularly off market, like if I had Ohio State if I had Georgia by 4, I probably would have mentioned it. But
I would also say that because I was talking about the mean squared errors before, that game is a lot of the reason why that the newer model is, or the older model is doing so well there is because it was so off market and wound up being very correct. So that's why small samples can be dicey with that kind of thing. Because one game can really influence things, which is why I don't want to bank on that being true going forward.
Absolutely. Jim, I want to talk to you about a couple of important Week 18 games. But first, I've noticed that you've been talking a lot about NFL props. You have JJ Zacharyson on covering the spread. Maybe give us a primer for how you think about props and maybe some tips for how to think about them.
Yeah, I think that the key thing is just like lean on what you know best, because if you open up like FanDuel Sportsbook, whatever book you want to use, there are a lot of offerings in there, especially if you're in there on game day when they have their full prop offering up. And a lot of those markets, you're not going to have the best read on. I know I don't. Maybe you do. Maybe you are a prop savant. You have a great read on every single market. I don't. So for me, I just want to lean into the markets I know best. And that means I'll have fewer bets, but that's also okay. I'd rather have fewer bets that are better than a ton of bets that are worse. So I tend to feel best about skill position props because of the overlap that it has with daily fantasy. And a lot of my research when I'm not doing betting stuff is for daily fantasy. And the overlap there is pretty big. So I feel good about predicting overall roles of running backs, deep targets for wide receivers and stuff like that. And both those play into prop markets. So rushing plus receiving props tend to be my favorites because I think I have a pretty good handle on that. So that's the kind of the key thing is finding areas where you think you have a good grasp of the way they work. And other thing too, I would say is, I didn't talk to Colin Davey on your show before. I'm not trying to blow smoke up Colin's butt, but I've been using BetScope's distribution calculator a lot for these this year.
Nice.
What you do is you take a projection, input it in there, and it'll show you like a fair market price for that projection in the prop market. So for spreads, I can go into my model and I can see how often a team favored by 5 covers a 3-point spread. I've got that backlog of data to say, okay, I can count for key numbers based on this, et cetera, and I can feel good about that. I don't have that database for props, and that's kind of something I love to have, but I can't do, everything. So I can take a number fire projection for rushing yardage or receiving yardage, plug it into BetScope's distribution calculator, and it'll tell me broadly good prices for each yardage threshold. So I would say it doesn't have to be BetScope specifically. I use theirs personally, but finding some kind of tool that can convert projections into a median number and a price around that is huge for me, at least. So find the market you like, account for the fact that you're looking at likely an average projection versus a median, but then convert that average into a median via some tools that you can find for free on the internet, which is a great thing for sure.
Absolutely. The undebated prop calculator does that as well. And the key thing there, which I learned the hard way last year, was that your average is always going to be higher than your median. And
right.
That's simply because of big plays, explosive plays.
Right.
They tend to skew the average to the high side, but the prop market is going to tend to be lower. So when you have a projection that says George Kittle is going to get 50 receiving yards and the prop market is at 47, those tend to be consistent, which is exactly what I learned the hard way last year when I started doing this. The unabated prop calculator is behind their paywall.
Yeah.
Obviously, Colin Davey is doing some really cool stuff with BetScope. Highly recommend checking that out. It's completely free, at least for now. And definitely take advantage of those tools. I'm pretty sure that there's nothing else out there, public or paid, that does anything like that. I mean, there's a ton of sites that will do your projections for yards or whatnot.
Sure.
But I don't think there's any other tools. So
yeah, I think the other way I could do it is I can I can find a way to get Numberfire's database of projections. I could find that and I could just run it. But if I can just put it into a website and have it do it for me, I'd rather, work smarter, not harder. So I could do it that way, but I know not everyone has access to databases of projections. So I think that using free tools, again, hopefully it stays free. Colin, please, I'm begging, but it's worth the paid subscription because that is something you do need to account for. And it is difficult to account for too in betting props.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Jim, let's transition to a couple of games. I actually wanted to ask you about the Lions at the Packers. You've already given us both your predictions and a little bit of your analysis and your the bet that you like in this game. But maybe let's dig a little bit deeper into these teams. First, the Lions, right? I mean, a team that started 1-6 and has since done pretty well and now is on the borderline of playoff contention. Do you believe in this team?
Yeah. I believe in their offense and because offense matters so much and can keep you in any game, I do believe in them. So I think that the best sample on the Lions is since they got DJ Chark back, he got to full snaps back on Thanksgiving for that Bills game. If you look at from that game on early downs passing, they're at 0.39 passing net expected points per dropback. So for context, Patrick Mahomes leads the league around 0.3. They're at 0.39 on early downs exclusively. And those tend to be, less volatile because you're not dealing with a third down that can have a swing of plus or minus 5 EPA. It's a bit stickier. And their late down success rate, that's where they struggled earlier on this year, where they were getting to third down, they weren't converting because, Goff can get a little bit of deer in the headlights-ish on late down, so he gets pressured and stuff like that. But in that time since Chark came back, their late down success rate is almost 50%. So I'm talking about the Eagles before, I think it's only 4 teams are above 50% for the full year, and the Lions are right there in this time. So if they were to make the postseason, they could be pretty dangerous. But also, Ed, we've had a lot of talks about Green Bay in the past. I think the same thing is true for them. So it's kind of weird to say, I love the Lions in this game, but also say Green Bay is also pretty good in this regard. They've struggled on late downs the entire year. That has been their Achilles heel. They're in the 53rd percentile on late down success rate versus 83rd percentile in early down EPA. So they've been good on early downs the entire year, but have struggled on third and fourth down. But they are getting better. Christian Watson's role expanded in week 10. I want to use that as a sample there because they've had a lot of injuries at wide receiver, a lot of personnel changes, and just kind of bad personnel for a lot of the year. But with Watson in there, they've outperformed expectations on late downs relative to their matchup in 5 out of 7 games. If they can get better on late downs, they have legitimate upside as a team. So I think both the Lions and the Packers could be very feisty if they make it. Honestly, Seattle's not bad either. So I'm pretty excited that one of those 3 teams will be the 7th seed because, they're facing likely the 49ers in the first round. They could get trucked there, but it's going to be a competitive game, I think. So I think these both these offenses are pretty fun. I think the Lions are the more undervalued team between the two, but I like both of them a lot. And I think both these teams actually have like legitimate juice, assuming, hopefully one of them makes. I don't know. I'd like to see, I'd prefer them a bit over Seattle. I love the Geno story. I think that Seattle's fun, but I think both these offenses could put up a pretty decent threat if they were to make it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you already got into Green Bay, which was what I was going to ask you about. I mean, they were particularly bad. I mean, a couple of fourth downs against Buffalo, if I remember correctly, in that primetime game that they were, a game in which I think they had 400 yards, but just couldn't convert a couple of key fourth downs. And they're simply significantly more healthy now. Randall Cobb, Allen Lazard are back. Christian Watson, I believe, dropped a pass in game one, and I think it
was the first pass.
Might have been the first pass of the game, and old man Aaron Rodgers decided he wasn't going to target him for a while, right. and then he was hurt, if I remember correctly.
And then David Bakhtiari had an appendectomy, which is like wild. Like he was struggling to get back this year, then got back, then had his appendix taken out. They've had a lot of injuries. Romeo Doubs is out for a while too, so this is the first time all year they've been healthy, and I think that it's probably no coincidence their offense has perked up in that time.
And they are looking up at a San Francisco team starting a rookie at quarterback.
Right.
We have not seen him fail yet, but I personally believe that's in the future pretty soon.
Yeah.
Depends on when that'll be. Philadelphia is obviously a very good team. Want to give them credit for that, but they're certainly not infallible by any stretch of the imagination. And like you mentioned, they've been pretty good on the smaller sample size of success rate on later downs, right? Which might regress to what their actual skill level is. I guess what I'm saying is the NFC seems pretty wide open to me.
Correct.
Would you agree with that?
100%. And like that's while saying that I do think that Dallas is a very good team. I think that Philadelphia is a solid team as well. San Francisco's been unreal. Like I had, I'm not sure if you had the same issue, but I kept betting against them a couple weeks ago. There was a stretch where there was like 3 consecutive games, and I was like, okay, there's no Debo now. They're going on the road to face Seattle. Big game for Seattle. I'll go with the Seahawks here. I think I had was it the Chargers? I don't know. There was a stretch where there's a couple games where I kept betting against them, and because I was making pretty big downward adjustments for Brock Purdy and Debo Samuel, or for Jimmy Garoppolo being out, Debo Samuel being out, and like it kept on biting me. I wish I'd had that for the Raiders game because the Raiders did cover there, but I don't know. I think they're a mystifying and I would say frustrating team, but I think they're legitimately good. Philly's good, Dallas is good, but none of them, if I just run my overall power rankings, are on the same tier as any of the AFC teams. Buffalo, Kansas City, Cincinnati, all above every team in the NFC right now. So yeah, I think the NFC is still pretty much wide open.
Yeah. Absolutely. I definitely had the disaster sending out Tampa Bay plus whatever against San Francisco, which turned out as badly as a bet could go.
Well, it was like, it's Tom Brady against Brock Purdy in his first career start.
Yeah.
I took it on Monday, and then I ran my numbers like, that was a mistake because I didn't actually show value once I actually ran it. But it was that was a frustrating one for sure.
Absolutely. We're going to get back into the Bucks in a little bit here, but first I want to ask you about the Jags at Titans, the division championship game. Jacksonville has been an interesting team for me just because I had a string of well-esteemed guests on this podcast all give me Jacksonville is going to be good as their surprise prediction earlier in the season. That's looked good at times. It's looked bad at times. Now they are going to Tennessee, who's going to give Josh Dobbs his second career start because Malik Willis has simply not been good. Ryan Tannehill is not going to play in this game. So a lot of interesting things going on here. What's your analysis?
Yeah, so you look at 6.5, that's a pretty big number. The Jags being favored, that's a big number in the NFL when both teams have a lot on the line. But I still think the Jags are undervalued. I bet them minus 6.5. My two models have them favored by 8.19 and 9.5 in this game. So both models agree undervalued are the Jags right now. So getting under 7, good enough for me. I think we could see this game get to 7 at some point. Josh Dobbs, probably an upgrade from Malik Willis because they wouldn't be starting if they didn't think he was. But it's a downgrade from Tannehill. I think that's definitive. And if you look at their rushing offense this year, it struggled. Their efficiency on running the ball has not been very good. And the Jags have actually been good against the rush. I know in that first game, Derrick Henry in the first half had like 100 yards. He was going bananas. So he was doing very well against them. But now you take away Tannehill. That's a pretty tough situation. Their defense overall has been much better against the rush in the past, at least in early downs so far this year. So I think they can actually probably do pretty well against, they match up well versus this Titans offense, which I think bodes well for them here. The Jags offense too is really, really good. They're up to 10th in my offensive power rankings, 11th overall. So, I mean, we've seen Trevor Lawrence play well for an extended period of time. I have no reason to think that will change. Relatively healthy beyond their left tackle, Cam Robinson. Outside of that, they're pretty healthy right now. The Titans secondary is not that good. So as long as they can get the ball out of Lawrence's hand, I feel like the Jags are in a very good spot. So it's a combination of downgrading Tennessee without Tannehill. I think the Jags match up well with them. And then just appreciating that this Jags offense, at least in my eyes, is legitimately good. That all leads me to thinking the Jags are a good bet here at -6.5.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like Jacksonville is the right side. They are at home. I know 6.5 is a pretty big number, but this one was a hard one for me this morning, right? Because I do feel like Jacksonville's the right side, and it was tough to get there in terms of like the numbers and I when you have a situation in which Josh Dobbs is getting his second career start for the second straight week, you have to figure something out. So it ended up being a combination of the market model and data from the current season, but that's kind of how I got to somewhere near 6-ish for this game. I do feel like that line's efficient. I don't think we're going to see it move too much. Awesome. So let us move on. We also want to talk about another game. Tampa Bay is at Atlanta. Somehow Atlanta is a 3-point favorite in this game, and you kind of have to understand the situation. Tampa Bay has locked up the division. They can't move up. There's no consequence in this game for Tampa Bay. They have decided to play all their starters, though. I believe the thought there is that you guys have sucked all year.
Right.
Let's get some reps in, especially you, Mr. 45-year-old quarterback. Atlanta was actually looking pretty good in my past offense numbers with Marcus Mariota, but he's no longer there. So what are you seeing in this game?
Yeah, so I have gone ahead and made the assumption that the Bucs go against what they've said, and they do wind up sitting starters because, like you said, nothing to play for. They're old. They could probably benefit from week off, despite the fact they've now played well. So I think that I agree they could use some run out there. So I would not be shocked if they do wind up going through with their word and playing their guys in this game. But even if I put Blaine Gabbert in as a quarterback, I took out Edson Vita Vea is probably going to 6. He missed 2 games before coming back in this most recent game. It would make sense to rest him, given he has been banged up and he's a super important player for that team. So if I take out those guys, I still think the Bucs should not be 3-point underdogs in this game. I've got them favored in one of my models still. The other model they're favored by at least a bit in both models right now. And that's, again, assuming that Brady doesn't play, assuming that Vita Vea winds up being out. I still think the Bucs are undervalued here because, what do the Falcons have to play for? Because they've been eliminated too. So 2 teams, nothing really to play for. Desmond Ridder has motivation to kind of prove he belongs, to get a shot next year as this team's quarterback. But I just can't get to a spot where the Bucs money line is plus 142. I can't get to a spot where they're 3-point dogs in this game, no matter how I manipulate things, even assuming that they go against their word and wind up sitting all their guys. So I'm making adjustments. I have both the Giants and Bucs resting guys in my numbers for this week under the, assuming that right now. Even then, I can't get to the Bucs being 3-point underdogs in this game, no matter how little it may matter for them.
Yeah, I think that's right. How do you go about making player adjustments for a quarterback like Tom Brady to Blaine Gabbert and then a defensive tackle like Vita Vea?
Yeah, so it's all manual. Every adjustment I make for injury is manual based on past data. Now, the problem with the Bucs and, past data on Blaine Gabbert is we don't have a whole lot of it, but it's based on just kind of trying to project how a quarterback would perform in the situation we'll be thrown into. And the Bucs have both their tackles healthy. Will they play in that game? That could potentially downgrade them a bit. But again, is it going to downgrade them the 5 points they need to downgrade them to get them to be on the market? Probably not. So it's just it is guesswork. But again, if I look at my numbers do get better after I add in the guesswork. So I actually feel okay about the process there. Is it ideal to have it be guesswork, projecting on efficiency? No, but I've been dealing with these number fire metrics for 7.5 years now. I've got a pretty good, idea of what a backup quarterback in an average, below average, above average situation can do. And the numbers have gotten better after I made those adjustments. So it's not the way I'd prefer to do it. I'd rather have some way I can make it be totally automated, but I'd rather do it imperfectly than not do it at all. And that's kind of the way I've found is I can just do it manually. It's still improving things, still doing well relative to the market at close. So even if it's not the way I'd want to do it, it is a method I still feel is better than nothing. And it has been successful for me.
So how many, I presume for Vita Vea, you're looking at net expected points when he's out compared to where he's in on rushing plays for the opponent?
Right. So I will look at Next Gen Stats has on-off splits for certain players. And so you can look at that and you can see, okay, when Derrick Henry is on the field, the Titans passing efficiency is X, or when Derrick Henry is off, their passing efficiency is Y, because I think that Henry matters a lot for the pass as well. You can look at that stuff and you can run that and you can kind of get a good guide of that. Those numbers are always kind of noisy, especially with defensive tackles, because Vita Vea is more likely to be on the field for an early down rush than he is for a late down pass. So that's kind of the way, kind of the tough part with them is noisiness. So you're kind of just making like, okay, I think this guy is worth X, and you bump up that amount in terms of like the efficiency. If they're at, let's say, negative 0.04 in early downs against the rush with Vita Vea, probably bump them down to like negative 0.02. So it is kind of unscientific, but just trying to account for the fact that he's not going to be in there and directionally making it correct. Even if the amplitude of it may not be perfect.
So what points wise, what does he mean to the spread?
Let me check. Okay, let's go over here. So I've got the Bucs. Okay. All right. Go into my data tab over on, I'm just going to do this in live because why not? Okay. Why not? So right now, my traditional model has the Bucs favored by 2.38 in this game. Okay. So let me take out the defensive adjustments that I made for them and get rid of that, and get rid of that. So it was 2.38 before. Removing the adjustment for Vita Vea, it's actually so they'd be 3.6 3-point favorites. So it's actually more than a point, which seems like a lot. But he does impact the pass as well. That was also, it was not just Vita Vea who was sitting out. I think I had Antoine Winfield out. I assume that he's going to sit out too. So defensive players generally, Vita Vea plus Antoine Winfield, maybe some of the other guys sit out, wound up being 1.3 points, which may seem like a lot, but I think that, based on the couple games they had without Vita Vea, I don't think that's totally off.
Well, and that's the total adjustment for both those players, right?
So that's not just like general assumptions they sit important players on defense, basically.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, you're not seeing Vita Vea as 1.3 points.
No, right. Not him individually.
Right.
Correct.
Exactly. Okay. Excellent. So, Jim, how about a surprise prediction for the rest of the NFL season?
So, I want to talk about the Ravens, but it's tough because their most likely scenario is playing at the Bengals in the opening round or at the Bills. I guess, or it could be the Chiefs, potentially, or the Jaguars. And my numbers view the Bengals as being like really, really, really good team because they made some adjustments in week 5. They struggled in week 5 against the Ravens, but since then have been just kind of like a flamethrower on offense, even with Jamar Chase missing time, T. Higgins missing parts of games and stuff like that. So my numbers are the Bengals, but they're also higher on the Ravens than consensus. So my prediction is that the Ravens will still, they're not dead yet. I think that's the way I want to phrase it. If I run my numbers without adjusting for injuries, so not giving the Ravens credit for missing Lamar Jackson for time, they're still the 7th ranked offense for me this year. They're also 7th overall. There is a cluster up top where you've got 6 teams that are in their own tier above the rest of the NFL. So they are in the second tier, but they're at the top of it. And, you would adjust down from what they did earlier on this year with Lamar because Rashad Bateman's out, Devin Duvernay's not there. So you would adjust down for that, but also a big part of the sample includes Tyler Huntley. So I think that what I feel about the Ravens is that they still have upside that we've kind of forgotten because Lamar Jackson has been out for so long and because when he's been there, he's had a lot of missing pieces. But I think that they have upside. So the problem is, how do we turn that into actionable, betting thoughts? They're probably going to get the Bengals in the first round. That might not go well based on how well Cincinnati's been playing. Again, my numbers do like Cincinnati a lot. So I can't say like, oh yeah, definitely check out the spread against Cincinnati because I think that the Bengals are a very good team. If they played the Bills, I could see taking the Ravens spread there potentially because they're not as underrated by my numbers as the Bengals are. But I just think that this Ravens team is still pretty lively because, again, even if you don't give them credit for missing Lamar Jackson for a large portion of the season, they do still grade out pretty well for me. So I feel like the Ravens will show upside again at some point this year. That's my prediction. I just don't know if that'll manifest in terms of betting their spread in X game or something like that because I have, I'm also high on a lot of teams they'll likely wind up facing.
Absolutely. I mean, what are we thinking about when Lamar gets back? I think it's unlikely he comes back for week 18, but what are the prospects after that? Do you know?
I think it seems pretty likely that he winds up playing for the postseason because the initial timeline was 1 to 3 weeks. He has already missed 3, I believe.
Okay, so he could potentially play this week.
Right. And I think that the way they were phrasing it was that they might hold him out if the division was not in the line. So if the Bengals had won Monday night, they would have said, okay, we can't win the division. We're locked into either the 5 or the 6 seed. We'll sit Lamar, get him 1 week healthier.
Yep.
I think that if the Bengals had hypothetically lost on Monday night and they had a full week to say, okay, this is an AFC North battle, I wouldn't have been shocked if Lamar had played in that game. So I feel like there's a decent chance he winds up playing in the postseason. I know it's been weird and we haven't got a lot of good updates on him, but I think that once we get to the postseason, I am expecting he'll be in there.
Interesting. Yeah, I think, the Baltimore ended up losing to Pittsburgh, and it was the second week in a row that Kenny Pickett has plucked one out of his rear end to, been pretty bad during the game, and then actually made a pretty incredible play against Baltimore this past week to win that game. So interesting to see if Pittsburgh gets a little bit overrated in the markets. I think the week before, that was against the Raiders, and that was a wide open throw for the touchdown to go ahead. So I'm not giving him too much credit there, but yeah, I mean, I guess obviously things are a lot different if Baltimore can pull that off and Pickett doesn't throw that nice touchdown to Najee Harris.
Yeah, he's interesting. Pickett is interesting. He does a lot of weird stuff that makes you go like, that's kind of odd. But then he has like these flash plays, and it's like, I want to make sure I don't get drawn in too much by the flash plays because yeah, that can lead you astray sometimes, but I also want to make sure I don't overweight the negative plays. We had Evan Silva back on like one of our first covering the spreads on. He was talking about negative highlight bias, and he was using that as a justification for betting Lamar Jackson win MVP, and then he won the MVP. So I want to make sure I don't overweigh the polls in either direction. But I think that with Kenny Pickett, my quarterback model wasn't super high in him coming out. He's kind of like a mid-tier first-round pick, which is where he wound up going. But it's he's interesting for sure.
I completely remember that episode with Evan Silva because this was before anyone thought that Lamar Jackson could throw a football.
Yeah, it was after his rookie year where he played like 6 games and he got roasted in the playoffs. Right.
And this was maybe a week or two after I talked to a friend of mine that had been in Ravens camp and had said, don't rely on Lamar to throw a touch pass.
Right.
And Evan said, look, his numbers for a rookie in the league were pretty good.
Yeah.
Adjusting for the fact that he was a rookie and just coming in. Right. And, so he's obviously, a contract year right now, and we'll figure out what ends up happening with that.
Yeah, I just want to see him in a different offense. Like, they're so frustrating to watch. Like, they've got not only the personnel, but like the scheme is just like annoying. So I still have faith in Lamar. I think that if he can be efficient in this version of the offense, which he has been. I know it wasn't like lighting things up, but like they played in a lot of wind earlier on this year, a lot of tough matchups. I still think that he can be very good. I want to see him healthy. I want to see him in a good scheme with some semblance of talent around him, because I think that he could get back to that MVP level at some point and kind of remind us of why he was there to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, I'd like to end the show with potentially a couple of non-sports questions. Sorry, a couple of questions that are potentially non-sports. So first, you will be held in captivity for a year without internet. However, you can bring one small item to pass the time. What would you bring?
So, kind of going back to like my childhood days, I'd bring a calculator, which sounds super nerdy, and it is, but I used to have a baseball game I'd play when I was growing up, and it was using a random number generator where each range represented an outcome. So like 0 to 5 or 1 to 5 is stolen base. If there's a guy on base, steals a base, unless it was home, because I didn't have stealing home back in that game. If it was, 11 to 10, it was a single where the runners advance one base, stuff like that. And I loved it. I kept track of stats. I'd run full games, keep stats for a full season, and then would give out free agent contracts based on the stats and how things went. I could do that forever if I had to entertain myself, and I probably would. Like a year sounds okay. I can deal with a year of just doing that. Hopefully I can have like some paper so I can keep track of the stats again, because I wouldn't really want to do it without keeping track of the stats, because that's kind of the entire point. But it was worked out where it would be, I think I had it where strikeout rate was like 20%, something like that. And it worked out where it was like, okay, pretty close to like what the league averages were at the time. So I'd want to do that again. Honestly, I miss it. So maybe I'll put myself in captivity for a year to force myself to do this, because like that was really, really fun to do back in the day.
So it's just a simulator? Like
so it was a random number generator. I had like the numbers listed out based on, if the number spits out a 59, I would know what that outcome was. And, it's not always applicable. Like, could be a pass ball, could be a stolen base, stuff like that. But just a random number generator, and then taking the outcome that I had written down for that number and then applying that to the game situation.
So you write down what, like the outcomes are 1 through 100, and you've written down exactly what each of those mean.
Yeah, it's basically like a key, just kind of like a legend of like, okay, this is what happens here. So I eventually kind of had it memorized. I didn't really need the key. Like, you knew 33 was a single with guys advancing 2 bases or whatever it was. So eventually had it memorized, but there was a key that I built based on like, okay, roughly I want the batting average to be this, et cetera, et cetera.
Interesting. So this is kind of like your own baseball simulator that you invented.
Yeah, I didn't know about Stratomatic back in the day because I think it was before my time. But if I had known about that, it would have saved me a lot of effort in making those numbers.
But like when you're a kid, you have all this time, right? So why not just make up your own thing?
Yeah, exactly. And it was fun. I had kept, I'd keep the season long stats on pen and paper, but then at the end of the year, put that all into Excel on the computer in my parents' basement. And then that would be like the historical database, but like game to game, it was kept track of on pen and paper.
You are assuming that calculators have a random number generator. I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do these days.
Those TI 83s did. Those were the best. Yeah. Yep.
I feel like I had a TI 85, and maybe I just didn't know that it had a random number generator.
Well, you can pull it up on Google. Oh, I guess I wouldn't have Google. I didn't think about that. I think a TI 83 would probably have one. I think it would be okay. Yeah.
I mean, you could also bring a 10-sided dice, or you could bring some dice and map results onto there, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I could figure out a way around it, but I think that's definitely a way I could occupy myself for a year.
That's awesome. That's a good answer. I like that a lot. All right, Jim. If you could be one historical figure, who would you be?
So I'm going to cheat, Ed, and I want to be this person, but not in the era in which they live, because it was like the 60s and 70s, and I don't really have any interest in living in the 60s and 70s. I feel like we've advanced in some ways since then. So I don't want to live in this era. And hopefully this is a unique answer, but I'd want to be David Pearson. For people who don't know David Pearson, he was a NASCAR driver back in the 60s and 70s. And you've probably heard of Richard Petty, but David Pearson was the other like marquee driver back in that day. And the reason I'd rather be David Pearson than Richard Petty is that David Pearson almost never ran a full schedule. So he raced for parts of 28 seasons, but he ran a full schedule in essentially just 3 of those. And he won the championship in 2 of those 3. He also won it in 1966. He ran 42 out of 49 races. So overall for his career, Pearson won 18.3% of the races he ran. Richard Petty, 16.9%. Part of that's higher, or part of that's lower because Petty ran every race when he was later in his career in his 50s, and you're not going to be very, very good then. Aging curves for NASCAR, you tend to peak when you're about 39. So he was well past his peak. So that did, curtail things a bit, but these guys are pretty evenly matched, but Pearson was kind of working part-time, and that sounds great. You get to be an insanely dominant race car driver. You get to be more courageous than I currently am. I'm a scaredy cat. So if I could have the courage to be a NASCAR driver, I think that'd be awesome. You get to have the spoils of being a 105-time winner in NASCAR's highest level, a 3-time champion, and still getting a pretty good work-life balance. So I think that'd be awesome. To have that kind of talent would be really cool. I thought about being a basketball player, but they play a lot of games. It's a lot of wear and tear, yada, yada, yada. I'd rather just be David Pearson, be kind of like a part-time guy, be insanely talented, insanely successful, still a lot of time to myself. I feel like that's kind of the ideal situation, right?
For sure. Did you say that he had another job? He wasn't...
Yeah, he wasn't working another job. He just didn't run all the races in NASCAR. Right. So if you look at his racing reference page, he ran 19 of 30 races in a bunch of years. So he's taken, running 2/3 of the races each year.
And would that be possible to do that today, either politically or, I guess he made enough money back then to still be a pro, right? So you can kind of chill.
Right. My guess would be that your sponsors probably wouldn't be super jazzed about a guy running a part-time schedule. Mark Martin did it for a year. There was Colleague Racing did it this year in NASCAR where they rotated drivers, but none of them were as good as David Pearson, obviously. So it's happened at times, but never anywhere near as successfully as he did.
You could say that your hemorrhoids are killing you and that you can only run 19 out of 30 races.
Some kind of fake injury. I could work on that.
So you want to be David Pearson, but you want to be alive now? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't really want to live in the 60s and 70s personally.
Yeah, why not?
Internet's great. Advances in...
Yeah, but internet's awful too.
True.
There's some days that I'm I want to live in the 70s. Not necessarily because of all that hippie love stuff, but
right.
There wasn't the internet. There wasn't that distraction. And it was kind of a golden era of novels and literature and stuff, the stuff I still tend to read today. Right. Gravity's Rainbow came out in, I believe, 1972. I think 73, something like that. And it would have been a world where people had a little bit longer attention spans.
Yep.
And it was kind of golden age of, I don't think we're going to see a lot of novels that I like being written anymore, simply because of the way society is going. And I certainly enjoyed the internet, but I think, I try to keep my time on Twitter to a minimum.
I don't. It's bad. The amount of time I spend, I don't really post as much, but more so scrolling Twitter and reading news updates.
Yeah.
I actually do like Twitter. I know the downsides are very real and that's totally valid. But it is cool the positive things that can come from it, and also advancements in medicine, technology, and stuff like that. There are downsides to those things too, for sure. Maybe not the medicine part, but there are downsides to technology advancing. But we've made a lot of advancements since then. So I want to live in even though our current era is flawed as well, I'd rather live in this era than the past era. So I want to take the David Pearson lifestyle where I can be ultra successful, dominant in my field, but also have a really good work-life balance. That's really what I'd want to strive for. And I also I'd have a lot of winnings. I could put a bowling alley in my basement, which is kind of what I want. So spend Monday through Thursday bowling in my basement, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday at the track. That's pretty cool. I'd get behind that.
I'm guessing since you expanded covering the spread to a daily podcast that you don't have the best work-life balance now?
No, it's the opposite because I got rid of writing. So I don't write really anymore, and that frees up so much time. And I'm sure you would agree with this too. Like podcast prep is a lot, but writing takes longer because you essentially have to write it twice because you have to edit it too. And like you obviously have a second layer of editors too, but like my work-life balance has been the best this year that's ever been, which is
really
nuts. It's nuts considering that we, adding on daily stuff for covering the spread, like that is a big undertaking, but taking away some of the other stuff has actually made it be my favorite year yet. And I think like my best year from that perspective yet.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. I was surprised by it too, believe me.
And you still do a lot of like solo episodes, right?
Yeah. And like, but like those for me are pretty easy because like, I'm just looking at my spreadsheets and I can like kind of, freebase is not the right word to use for that. I can kind of like freestyle. Maybe that's the word. Freebasing means something else.
Freebasing means something else. Yes.
You can kind of freestyle based off of like what my numbers are saying. So like, honestly, like those are pretty easy. It's tougher for like the daily baseball show that I do, the solo shot. That one's a bit tougher because it's like so numbers oriented. But if it's like talking about the Lions or great on passing offense, I can say that without, having a specific number tied to it. I can look at the specific number if I want it because my spreadsheets are right next to me, but and that's not even too bad either. So it's been really nice, honestly.
So I'm not talented enough to just riff off of my numbers. So when I do solo episodes, I do it twice.
Yeah.
Because the second time it sounds good and I don't sound like an idiot and I can present it to other people. Even though the episode I did last week, man, I was listening to it again. It was a really good episode.
Yeah.
It was really good. But I was like, man, you were really December was a pretty stressful month, just like everything leading up to the holidays and the stupid World Cup, which was obviously great and I'm glad it happened. But it's like, man, you sound really tired in that episode.
So I'm not sure if this is like, so I know why this is the case, but I'm more okay with like messing up in that regard. Like if I don't do something perfect on a podcast, that's okay with me because like I did a lot of play-by-play and you're gonna mess up a lot doing like football, baseball play-by-play. And my hope is that listeners are forgiving. I think they are because like no one's like yelling at me when I do talk too fast. I know that for sure. But like people don't yell at me. So I hope it's not a big deal, but I think that I just become comfortable with being imperfect. So that allows me to kind of riff a bit more, knowing that if I stumble, like, who cares? It's a conversation. But I think the background in doing play-by-play definitely has shaped my mindset around that.
Right. And my background is giving talks, at least back in academia, where I would probably practice it a couple times, before I actually give the talk.
Exactly.
And so now that I'm in the sports world where there's more of a demand to kind of get out content, I limit it to, I have a pretty good process down, right? Like I'll wake up in the morning, I'll know, I'll have an outline, I'll do a rough draft, listen to it, edit the outline, and then do a final draft. And that usually is good. And I don't know. I guess that sounds to me a lot like your writing process, where you do have to edit it again. Right. And then also, like, I do have some plans of like turning these audio episodes into written content because that actually works pretty well. Yeah. Like I actually have 2 or 3 years of like March Madness content that has never seen the light of day as the written word, which it's a goal to change. It's just
a lot easier to share it if it's written. Like you can get that out, like, especially if you're doing like research based stuff. Like that has a lot of value to you if it's written.
It does, and to my site. And even though I know that, I have still yet to do that, Jim. So
there are lots of things we would do if we had the time.
Yeah, well, no, it's going to get done this year because like one of my goals is to be less stressed out those 4 days. Yeah, and I will feel less stressed out if I have like 2 really interesting pieces of content. One being like upsets only really happen in basketball because of 3-point shooting, stuff like that. So I don't remember.
I sometimes miss writing, but also I don't. I don't know. Like if it means I can do more daily shows, talk about things, that are shorter shelf life, talk about like baseball strikeout props and stuff like that. If that's a trade-off, I'll happily take that versus having more writing to do. Like that's okay by me.
Well, that's interesting too, right? Because I feel with audio, like it's hard to kind of expand your audience, but
Yeah.
the audience that you do get is more likely to convert.
Right.
And sign up for an account on FanDuel or whatever the goals are, right?
Right. And like, I know that like the audience will always have a cap because it's more of an investment to like listen to something than it is to read something. So like, I know that. But like, I don't know. I think that the people at Numberfire and FanDuel have been like generous enough with me where they know that like they understand what you just said, where the value of a listen is more important than the value of value of additional Twitter followers and stuff like that. So I can afford to not be hot takey on Twitter to gain followers. I can afford to focus on audio and stuff like that. So a lot of it is I just have good bosses who understand stuff and are, analytical about things and understand that. So it is a privilege to be able to be like, yeah, I'm not going to be hot takey on Twitter to gain followers. But I think that is it's definitely very nice to have that in your corner.
Absolutely. Jim Sonis, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Football Analytics Show. Please let everyone know where they can find all your good work.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Jim Sonis. All my stuff is over on Numberfire, the Covering the Spread podcast feed. Our DFS show is the Numberfire Daily Fantasy podcast feed, and I'll be playing some calculator baseball if you need to find me. Just be doing that once again. Now that I've remembered how fun that was.
That sounds good, Jim. You gotta spell out your Twitter account, right? I mean,
that's right.
Dude, this is what you do every episode. What?
At Jim Sonis, JimSannes. It's a weird last name, so I get it.
Sorry, I just hear you do that every time we're uncovering the spread together, right? So I was like, wait.
And then I feel weird when I don't spell it, so I agree with. I understand where your brain is coming from there.
There you go, Jim. Thanks again for your time.
Alrighty, thank you, Ed. Appreciate it.
This is Ed Fang. I'm honored to be your host of the Football Analytics Show. I really hope you enjoyed that interview with Jim Sonis. I thought it was very interesting how much his methods have developed since the last time that I've had him on this podcast. Please go check out all his good work, especially Covering the Spread, which is a podcast from FanDuel. I'm on there every Wednesday. Go check it out. Just a reminder, you can get my free email newsletter on my site. And if you sign up for it, you get a chance to listen to an audio episode that I made for patrons of this podcast. It's entitled The Secret to Predicting the College Football and NFL Playoffs. It talks about explosive plays and success rate and the relationship. And I get into Buffalo and Philadelphia for the NFL, which still has some obvious consequences heading into the playoffs. To check out my free email newsletter, go to thepowerrank.com. That is my site for better sports betting tips through data and analytics. Once again, that's thepowerrank.com. Once again, my name is Ed Fang. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you again next week.